Hey guys, hello and welcome to Spud Life with me, your host, Tatty Tim. Okay, so without further ado, let's crack on with this week's episode. Part 3 of music, can you believe it? You're thinking to yourself, Jesus man, how many episodes of music could he have? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot, because we're coming up to the end of the year and good old Spotify and the little Spotify band that lives inside it apparently tells me this year I've listened to 90 different genres. So yeah, my music taste is quite eclectic to say the least. I think I skipped I definitely skipped. Hang on, let me sort this out. Right, is that better? I think I'm a bit too near the mic. Yeah, so I skipped a reinvention of myself after the sort of ska and mod era that I went through, and I went straight into kind of like a pseudo kind of hippie kind of stage. Oh blimey, governor, I don't know what's going on with the old settings today. It's like it's all over the shop. I think I've got it right now. It's probably a little bit on the high side, but I can hear myself pretty well and it's looking okay on the screen. So anyway, yeah, the old huge pseudo hippie stage that I went through. It was a continuation really of the sort of mod thing, like I said, because most of the sort of mod bands and that I was listening to, so you've got your bands like the Small Faces and Yardbirds, all bands, different bands like that. They all evolved into that sort of psychedelic scene that came in the sort of late 60s. It was funny because I was talking to my daughter and her boyfriend. They're kind of big Arctic Monkeys fans, and they weren't totally enamoured with this summer's hit from the Arctic Monkeys, and a lot of people giving them grief for it. Not my daughter and my boyfriend, obviously, but the Arctic Monkeys themselves. And I thought, well, no, not really. I mean, if you think about it, they're creative people, and if you're a creative person, you're not going to reel out the same old stuff day after day, week after week, year after year. Oh yeah, even though that's probably what you were first known for and what people loved about you, you're not going to keep doing that all the time. And I said, if you take the Beatles for instance, they started off on the good old pop. I mean, they pretty much invented pop, didn't they? So, and yet then you take the White Album, Let It Be, Sgt. Pepper's, Yellow Submarine. Imagine if they'd come out with that in the very first, in the early 60s, people would have been freaked out totally. But they evolved into that, and that's what their creativity led them into, and it's a completely different style of music almost to what it was. You listen to A Hard Day's Night, and then you listen to Let It Be, two completely different sounds. So it's just a natural evolution of music. And I think with me, it was that natural evolution of going from that sort of mod kind of era that I'd gone into, and because I've loved music so much, you kind of get into, so in one respect I was going right back and listening to some really early blues stuff, because one of the band I was in, the guys were mad into, the one brother was into sort of mad into the Small Faces, absolutely insane, Yardbirds, all that sort of stuff, the Kinks, Spencer Davis Group, all of them sort of things. And his brother he'd gone right back to what inspired those bands, so he was into Howlin' Wolf and I can't think of any blues guys off the top of my head. I'm going to have to Google it and come back to you later, but all the original sort of blues guys from the sort of 20s, 30s, 40s and onwards sort of thing, the proper acoustic guys that kind of started the ball rolling. So yeah, so I was down that kind of little rabbit hole. Then I kind of, as the bands evolved and the Yardbirds and the Faces, they became Led Zeppelin and the Faces and all that sort of thing. I got into different kind of stuff. I mean, the Ogden's Nut Gone Flake, which was a great album by the Small Faces, that leads you then to bands like Cream. Then you get into Hendrix, and then I got into the Doors, and it was all that sort of late 60s, early 70s psychedelic punk, psychedelic sort of pop and rock, and that kind of, to go with that, it was kind of like the look that went with it. So I had that kind of pseudo hippie kind of look going on. So my hair was not as long as it is now, but it was kind of past my collar, so to speak, and I was living that kind of on looking that part. So I had this you couldn't really buy flares then, even though they were kind of, they'd been and gone. That more sort of straight leg trouser was in, so it was impossible to get flares. So what we used to do then, so the same moms that we got to turn our jeans in when we were into, you know, the ska scene and the mod scene to a degree, we then got them to, we put massive triangles of denim into it. So we'd cut the bottom of your jeans up, and then you'd sew like a big denim patch in the bottom. Do you get what I mean? So you'd make these enormous flares, and then you'd just wear kind of tie-dye sort of cheeseclothy shirts, and had this headband. Obviously used to stink of patchouli oil and a thing called white musk. White musk was a bit like another kind of rocky hippie kind of smelling perfume that you could get from the rag market down in Brum. And I got this, I found this amazing Afghan coat, but it was too small for me, so I decided to cut the sleeves off it, and I turned it inside out, and I used to wear it with a belt. So I'd basically, like, which looked like a dead animal all over, like wearing it like as a waistcoat, with this sort of big leather belt going over the top of it, these flares on it. And I used to wear these desert boots, like, you know, like suede desert boots. You'll know what they are if you know your sort of style. And I used to think I was the dogs, and I'm not sure I had glasses. I may have copied Lennon and gone down that little sort of round spectacles on with a different Aussie wore pairs similar as well, didn't they? But that was my sort of look in after the mod sort of scene. It wasn't necessarily just the look, you know, the look kind of was really, really secondary to the music. With me, I was getting deeper and deeper into different sort of styles and genres of music, and it's funny how this era of music, you know, it's an era that I was alive in, but I wasn't, you know, I was basically 1 or 2 when these guys were making this music. But it kind of really, really resonated with me, and it was something that really touched my soul. It was, you know, listening to some of the Hendrix stuff. We used to go to this, there used to be a fantastic record shop in Birmingham called, probably still there, it was called Reddington's Rare Records, and it was the archetypal great music shop, vinyl galore. I mean, obviously that's all there was in those days. So there'd be like iconic sort of album covers plastered all around the walls, some really, really rare kind of expensive stuff, you know, singles and loads of LPs, posters all over the walls, and tour posters, all sorts of stuff like that. And you could get tickets there to see bands that were passing through. But they had like so many, it wasn't a massive shop, and there was loads of stuff outside, and the albums outside were usually sort of like about £1, 99p, £1, maybe up to £3 max. I mean, you're talking them days, even when a new album came out, it was only £2.99, £3.99. So even when these sort of earlier albums that were out, which were from the sort of 70s, they were pence in comparison. And the amount of bands that I got into, so I got a Jimi Hendrix album that I thought, yeah, I'm getting that. You could get about 10 albums for about £5. You know, that was the sort of prices you were looking at. And the amount of albums I got over the years in that shop, literally just by the album cover, because it doesn't happen anymore, does it? I was playing, I went to see a band at Brickyard the other week. This guy had come over from Nashville, David Graham and the Penguin Brothers. Dave, if you're listening, we're definitely going to get you on this podcast next time you're over, mate. What a show that was. But me and him were chatting after the show, and we were just talking about how the whole thing of going to a record shop doesn't really exist particularly anymore. And just the artistry of on album covers was just the amount, and he said the same, the amount of album covers he'd bought, not album covers, the amount of albums he'd bought purely on the front cover, and that was it alone. Didn't have a clue what the band was like. And I've bought loads. I mean, you had a rough idea that it was going to be sort of rocky or, a bit hippie-ish or that sort of thing because of the style of the album cover, but in general, you'd never heard the band before. You might have heard of them, but you'd never heard the music. So it was a great way to buy music. The certain albums you knew what you were getting and all the rest of it, but other things, like I got a band called Gong and the Flying Teapots, and I bought that album purely off the album cover and the name of the band. I thought, if there's going to be a band called Gong and the Flying Teapots, they're going to be fantastic. They're going to be right up Moore Street, and they were very, very psychedelic, very psychedelic. But then that gets you into, Pretty Things, another fantastic British sort of psychedelic band from that sort of era. Cream, like I said earlier, Hendrix, The Doors. I got into The Doors, big star. Some of their stuff, Riders on the Storm, and People Are Strange. I mean, that was great. That was a great cover of that in the film with, I can see it now, with Kiefer Sutherland in it. Oh, when he was just a kid. It was all about vampires. You're shouting it back at me now, aren't you? What it is? I can't hear you. Shout louder. Oh man, what was it called? Lost Boys. That was it. I heard you. Yeah, I heard you shouting Lost Boys at me. But yeah, there's a great cover of that by, it was a band, an 80s band at the time. I can't think who they were. But what a great song. And that song really resonates with you. People are strange when you're a stranger. It's kind of, yeah, man, people are strange, and it was probably worse back then because some of the looks you used to get if you were a bit way out, it was still very, tattoos were frowned upon still in those days. Nobody had a tattoo unless you were a biker in the military or a villain. That was it. Nobody else tattoos at all. So I got one as soon as I could. But anyway, that's for another story, and another guest coming up for that one. So that'll be something to tune in for. So, but yeah, I got into then a really good band because, like I said, a couple of my mates had elder brothers. So Greg, he had a really older brother who was into the mod scene, but then he had an older younger brother, if that makes sense. So, and he was into he'd lived through more of the sort of the glam rock kind of hippie kind of era. That was his sort of era, and he got us into bands like Spooky Tooth, The Faces, and they were wicked. You put them on the record player when we go around to Greg's, and we were getting ready to go out, and he'd be getting ready to go out as well, but he was just going down the boozer, whereas we was going off into town, and it was fantastic listening to it, because the enthusiasm he had for the music was what's the word when it's kind of compelling? What's the word? When someone's really enthused about something and it kind of rubs off on you. It was like that, and the first thing I did then was when I went to Reddit and I sourced out Spooky Tooth, and it's Spooky 2, the album, and it's the guy's voice is incredible, and you think to yourself, how can certain bands not make it? I mean, the musicianship of that, it was incredible. And if you get a chance, I'll try and put as much links onto things as I possibly can. But Spooky Tooth, what a band, really. A bit like they've got that same sort of vibe as the Small Faces, like later Small Faces and the Faces. Then obviously I got into Cream, Ginger Baker, phenomenal drummer. Apparently not a very nice man, but you can't knock his drumming. But yeah, so, and then got into a lot of later Beatles stuff as well. I think if you go in doing that hippie-ish kind of route, it's impossible not to get into some of the Beatles stuff. I had two double albums out at the time. One was red and one was blue. I think the red albums were from all the early stuff, so it was like up to 1965 maybe, so from 63 to 65. So that had all the sort of poppy, Love Me Do and Hard Day's Night and you know, all the poppy sort of classic Beatles stuff, and then the blue double album that had all the later stuff, all the more hippie stuff, and Norwegian Wood, and Let It Be, and what was the other? Yellow Submarine. Can't think of it, but you know the route I'm going down, and it was kind of like, yeah, I was digging that scene, but because it had kind of been and gone, and I was kind of living that through it in a very sort of mid-80s, almost 20 years too late kind of vibe, there was nowhere to really go and listen to bands or see things, but I was probably still a little bit too young, you know, to do that yet. And so I was just listening to stuff in my bedroom, headphones on, and just, you know, going around to your mates' houses, and we all kind of evolved along a similar route, do you know what I mean? So we all were listening to a similar sort of stuff, and we kind of listened. Someone would buy something, and you'd listen to something, oh, I really like that, and so you'd be just chilling in your mates' bedrooms and just sort of taking records round and listening to stuff, and maybe having a fag, and then a couple of cans, a bit of cider, just sort of enjoying the time, really. And then one of my I can't get my words out. Right, one of my mate's brothers, Russ, he was a little bit older than us, maybe, so he was like about 17, 18, but obviously that's quite a big age difference when you're that age, from 17 or 18, you know, they've got facial hair starting, they're getting served in boozers, and it just seems like such a big age group, doesn't it? Age gap, I should say. So he'd got us into like Hawkwind and stuff like that. And Hawkwind, wow, what an impact that had on me. It was like, whoa, these are fantastic. You kind of introduced us to Jethro Tull and that as well. But I think Hawkwind even though I did massively get into Jethro Tull, especially the songs in the Wood album, because being that sort of hippie, I kind of like that oldie English mixed with bluesy, rocky sort of stuff. So it was, you know, and the old flute bit going on as well. So I saw Tull a few times over the years, and they've never disappointed. You've just got Ian Anderson is a very good showman, I must say. So it was one of those bands, but I think one of the bigger bands that really influenced me was Hawkwind. It was just like, whoa. I remember getting Sonic Attack, and I don't know if anyone's listened to any Hawkwind, but it's music to be listened to while, should we say, chemically enhanced. And I've never really been chemically enhanced, and I'll tell you what, we'll go down this story now of my first and last experience of taking marijuana. So I think first of all you've got to put this into context, and remember this was 1982, 83, I think, something like that. So I was 14, 15 at the time, something along them lines anyway. And you got to remember, back in them days, there's no such thing as there's the little roadmen that there are nowadays that are standing around on street corners, sucking on vapes, leaning against little electric scooters with the hoodies up and the black tracksuits on, and the electric bikes, isn't that? There was none of that. It was just like you had to go to the source, and the only source there was back in Birmingham in them days was the Rastas in Handsworth. So that's where we had to go. So me and Russ, my mate Russell, we got on the bus. And it was the 90 and the 91 bus used to go through Handsworth in them days, off into town. So we went down a circle, got on the bus. He gets on the bus, and we're there, right? We're chatting away on the bus. Says, right, you do all the talking. What we're going to ask for? I says, I don't know. So we didn't have a clue what we was asking for. We were so kind of streetwise in so many ways, but so naive as well in so many other ways. So it was like, well, what are we going to ask for? He says, well, I don't know. He says, we'll just, it'll happen. And he says, right, well, so we didn't have a lot of money on us. So he says, right, we'll just get there and see what happens. He says, you do all the talking. He says, righto. So we get onto the bus, chatting away, gets off in Handsworth, and there's the place in Handsworth in them days. It's called the Villa Cross pub, and I think it burnt down a couple of years later. I think 2 years later there was the Handsworth riots, and I'm pretty sure the Villa Cross got either shut down or burnt down. I can't quite remember. But anyways, we gets off the bus, right, and you'd have thought it was Tony Montana and Manny. Yeah, you've all seen Scarface. Say hello to my little friend. And yeah, so we got off that bus, and in our minds we were going to do the biggest marijuana deal the country had ever seen. It was just like, here we go lads, here we go. There's only the two of us, and if two skinny little white boys get off the bus in Handsworth with sort of shoulder length hair, looking like a pair of bedraggled hippies that have been dragged through a hedge backwards. They're only there for one reason. So we walk up to the pub. There's all these rastas outside just chilling. It was a summer's day. So all these guys are all just chilling outside it. Like I said, we thought we were Tony Montana and Manny off Scarface. In reality, we just looked more like Beavis and Butthead going for a drug deal, and it was just like, you can imagine what we looked like. So we gets up to him, we goes to the first rasta that we come to, and apologies for the for the worst Jamaican accent you're ever going to hear. But we walk up and this guy goes, "Yeah man, what you want?" And we was all, like some marijuana, please. And it was all, yeah man, what you want? Meaning, he says, I got grass, I got weed, I got sensimilia, I got skunk, I got black. And we just looked at one another. We thought, shit, we didn't think it would be this sort of complicated. We didn't think it was going to be like a pick and mix section at Woolworths. So it was like, and we just looked at one another, and he was the one that was going to do all the talk, and then all of a sudden I had to do it. He just looked at me, shrugged his shoulders, and I said, can we have some black please, not knowing what we were getting. Turns out we were getting this black resin, marijuana resin. So he goes, yeah man, how much do you want? He says, do you want an eighth, do you want a 16th, do you want a quarter? It was all, can I have a fiver's worth, please? And he stuck through his teeth. He's all, yeah man. So he called this young lad across. He's all, and they said something to one another, and then he pulled out this lad pulled out this chunk of fucking, looked like a smallish kind of Mars bar wrapped up in this sort of greaseproof paper. Got this knife out and cut this chunk of black off and give it us. And it was all, we had £5 that we'd saved between us from our paper round money. So it was kind of like, yeah, we were the biggest, coolest drug dealers in Birmingham at that point. So we got that, we got our dope, and we legged it back to the bus stop, waiting for the next bus to come to take us back home. And it was like, we were all excited. Oh, we got it on the bus, and we kind of hiding it. You're looking so suspicious. It must have looked like, if anyone was watching, it was so obvious that we were up to no good. It was, apart from we were the only two white kids in the area, and that was a dead giveaway. And it was just like these two skinny white boys sort of looking so sheepish and nervous that they'd got this, you know. And at that point, I'm pretty sure marijuana was totally illegal. I know it kind of is still, but it's more frowned upon now, isn't it, than it is illegal. So anyway, we got in the bus, we go home, and I was so excited because it was like, at last we're going to try this marijuana. And it's like, because you'd heard all these stories about it, and you know, there was nothing back in them days apart from what people had told you. So there was no internet. There was a few books that you could get in the library, but you were just basically going off other people's bullshit stories that they told you about the experiences of it. So I thought, this is going to be awesome. This Hawkwind album now, Sonic Attack, which I'd loved, it's just going to go to the next level. I'm going to be like listening to this with the headphones on. I'm going to be astral planing through multiverses and different sort of planes of existence, and I'm going to have out-of-body experiences, and it's going to be the best thing ever, and it's going to be awesome. So it's like, I couldn't wait to get home. So we got home, get back to his place, because his mum and dad were out. So we go up to his bedroom, and everyone smoked in his house. Everyone smoked in those days anyway. So his mum and dad smoked it, they wouldn't really smelt it, so we thought. And then rolled up this joint, And we started to puff away, and we were just sharing it between us. And we didn't have it on the headphones, but we had the Hawkwind album on. It was a bit of an argument of what we were going to put on, but we won with the Hawkwind, because he did quite like Hawkwind. So I put it on, and was listening to it, and it's puffing away. And I was like thinking, oh, it's going to happen soon, it's going to happen. And I was like puffing, and then you kind of got like it was almost like that feeling, you know, when you ever, if anyone's ever smoked that's listened to this, you know, when you have that first cigarette in the morning, and it's that first buzz of the day. So I thought, oh, and maybe I was overthinking. I was thinking, oh, is this it? Is this going to happen? And then it was like, so I was just sitting there, and then next thing I know, I was asleep, and I completely missed the out of body experience that I was looking for. So it was kind of like, oh, this is shit. So I woke up, and it was like, what happened to you? She said, oh, nothing much. I said, what happened to you? I said, I just fell asleep. And it was like, if anyone knows me, the guys from the file will tell you this, I do not need any help falling asleep at all. I can fall asleep standing up. If anyone in the fire lads will tell you, whenever we were on a job that was prolonged, I would fall asleep in the back of the fire engine, no bother. And believe you me, backs of fire engines aren't designed to sleep in. In fact, I've sat in more comfortable pews in churches. That's how comfortable the back of a fire engine is. But I've always managed to do it, and to the fact that I'm snoring, so I must be fast asleep. So yeah, it was like, no, I don't really need any help falling asleep, and it didn't give me any lucid dreams that I could remember. I just sort of fell asleep, and I just felt totally underwhelmed by it all. So that was my first and last time I've ever had dope, grass, marijuana, whatever you want to call it. In fact, I've never really had any drugs particularly. Drinking was my only thing. When I was having some of my first tattoos done, I got offered cocaine, and I turned it down. And it wasn't for the fact that I bottled it. I've always been a daring sort of person, and I've always tried most things, but it was the fact that I turned it down just in case I did like it. You know what I mean? And it was, I don't want to be addicted to coke, thanks. I don't want to be addicted to anything. So, and I've always been high on life. You know what I mean? I told that story to somebody that I've not long met him, and we was having a chat in one of the pubs. This was about a couple of years ago, and I said, God, and they tried all sorts of shit, and it was like, God, man, that's amazing to think that you had such a wise head on you at that age. And I suppose I've always been a bit sort of on the wiser side of things. I've calculated risks, but I've always been high on life. I've never needed any external. I've done, I've got pissed and all the rest of it. Who hasn't? But I've never needed to. It's not my go-to. In fact, I don't drink now at all. So I don't drink. I don't smoke. But I don't feel as if I'm missing out on anything either. I'm quite proud of the fact now that I've got to this level in my life, and I've never took any hard drugs at all, and I never will. Why would I want to dull my senses? And some people say, oh yeah, it enhances your system and your senses and makes you more creative, and I don't think it does. I think that's bullshit, and I have far better experiences in life being totally sober and letting my senses enjoy every little second of that experience how it's supposed to be enjoyed, rather than it being dulled by some chemical that I've put inside my body. So, but that's just me. I mean, each to their own. But yeah, it's funny. We can talk about drinking and stuff. I mean, drinking, I did go down a bit of a slippery slope, and I managed to pull myself back out of it. And if anybody is out there and they're listening to this and they are on that sort of slippery slope, give us a bell, and we'll talk it through, because you can come through the other side. I'm not saying I was an alcoholic, but I could have quite easily become one, put it that way. And I did manage to come through the other side, and it's easy, but it's difficult, if that makes sense. I can attest to the fact that it can be done, you can get through the other side, and your life is so much better if you don't drink. Trust me, it's some people have got the ability where they can just have a drink and that's it. Others, that my way of thinking was, if you're going to have a drink, you may as well get pissed, otherwise what's the point? And so, which is a bit of a I still kind of hold to that, because it doesn't taste nice, does it? And it is a poison. So if you're going to do it, you may as well do it properly. So yeah, that was my way of thinking, and now my life is just so much fuller, so much better. You know, my clarity is clearer. Everything in my life is so clear. It's like someone's just, you know, when you've got a really shitty, horrible, dirty window and you clean it. That's what my life's become like. This wouldn't be happening now if I was still drinking, put it this way. How many years now thinking, quick, give him a drink, getting pissed again? But no, it's true. I wouldn't be doing anything I'd be doing now. I'd just probably be passed out on the settee, snoring my head off, and waking up the next morning groggy. And that was my existence for so long. But bloody hell, we've gone down the right little rabbit warren here, haven't we? But this was going to be saved for another episode, but we'll roll with it now, being as I'm yakking on about it. But it's funny how it controls you in the end. The alcohol does. You think you're controlling it, but in the end it controls you. And as much as you want to, sometimes you can't. But I'm living proof that it can be done, and I would love to be able to help anybody out there that is struggling with alcohol or any sort of substance abuse or any kind of addiction at all, really. Give us a bell. I've quit smoke. I used to be a massive smoker, so I quit smoking just like that. It was just, I'm not saying it was easy, and sometimes I still smell a cigarette, not roll up so much, but you know that smell of a proper cigarette. I think that smells nice, but I don't get the fact that I don't want to smoke one. It's just that something in your brain says, that smells nice. But anyway, if anybody is out there and they are struggling with any sort of addiction or booze or drugs, or please give us a bell, drop me a DM, and I will do my utmost to help you through it if that's what you want. Not everybody wants the help, but I'm more than willing to give anybody my experience, my help, and get them through it, because I guarantee your life is going to be so much better when you do quit it. It will be, you know, and any depression you're going through or any anxiety you're having because of it just clears. Your mind becomes so clear, everything becomes lucid. It's just amazing. Life just has a completely new aspect to it once you're kind of sober and you're how you're meant to be naturally. And believe me, I have had so many much better kind of experiences, and I can't think of a decent word to describe it, but things that have happened to me that have been far superior to any time I've got pissed. It's unbelievable. You know, the feeling you get is just, it's fantastic. So yeah, if you do want any help, I'm not saying everybody does, but I'm more than happy to help anybody if I can. Come through the other side, we can talk about things. We can meet up if you want. You can DM me on here, and yeah, we can get the ball rolling for you, and hopefully your life can change as well, and you might be able to start another crappy podcast like this. But no, honestly, seriously, it is. I know it is. It's a horrible thing to be addicted to something, but I can promise you now, it's not unbeatable. Is that the right thing to say? Yeah, it is unbeatable. What I'm on about, it is. It's not for life. If you want it, I'm here to help you. Simple as that. And I'd love to be able to help anybody out there. So yeah, drop me a DM, and we shall now carry on about my musical adventures with no drugs, just alcohol. But to be fair, there wasn't a lot of drinking even. It was more the music thing, and I think particularly we used to get pissed up on. I think a lot of the kids our age and that my generation, it was all Tenant Super and Special Brew. They were the two kind of really strong alcoholic drinks at the time. So we always used to drink White Lightning, which was this cider, which was about 1,000,000%. No, it was White Lightning was about. It was getting up to sort of wine sort of percentages. I'm sure it was about 11% for this cider, and then we used to make snake bites out of it. I don't think you can actually physically get a snake bite now in a pub, but you used to be able to get snake bites in pubs, and I think that was because it sent people insane. It really did send you mad. You would literally only have to have probably a pint, depending on how big you were, but 2 pints maximum of the Tenant Super or Special Brew, and a bottle of Wicked. No, not Wicked. What was it called? White Lightning. God Almighty, that stuff was like rocket fuel. And you drink it, and you could always, because it'd never be in fridges, so you'd get this horrible. This Tenant Super was disgusting. It was like treacle. But I think yet again that was about 8 or 9%, which for a beer, in them days, which your normal beer was like your Carling Black Labels, which was what, 3% or something. So you may as well just drink your mate's piss, because it was just probably stronger. But it was just like drinking treacle, because it never came out of a fridge. It was always on the side, because no one ever drunk it. And the amount of times you'd get, usually, because I used to have to go in because I was one of the tallest ones, into the off licence. But usually we'd be hanging outside the offie, and you'd just ask somebody to go in and get us some 4 cans of Tenant Super, please, mate. Or can you give us 4 cans of Special Brew, please? And we were all very polite, weren't we? I mean, even with my drug dealing, I was very polite. But I think you should always, if you're going to conduct a sort of illegal drug deal, you should always have good manners. It pays to have good manners, children. So I don't know whether it was the sort of underwhelming experience I had with marijuana, or whether it was just a natural evolvement that was going on within me. But we then went from a sort of this pseudo hippie look to a full-on psychobilly, which psychobillies were kind of, imagine that rockabilly sort of look, but more mean. It's mean. Not really mean. I'm not a mean person, but I don't know, how would you describe them? I think psychobillies, we were more into that horror-y type of sort of stuff, so hence that horror theme again. So yeah, we kind of went from, I kind of had my hair cut, and because I got this stupid curly hair, right, I could never get a really good flat top. So psychobillies were that sort of, they had more of a flat top sort of haircut. It was a bit more extreme than a rockabilly. So rockabillies were that sort of classic, sort of 1950s. Imagine Grease, if you don't know what I'm talking about. So imagine the bad boys in Grease, John Travolta. That's kind of a rockabilly kind of look, if you don't know what one is, to a degree. Give you a rough idea anyway. But then the psychobillies were a bit more punkified. It was kind of rockabilly for the 80s, if that makes sense. So there was a whole new wave of stuff that came out, a whole new wave of bands that came out. It also kind of coincided with the goth movement that kind of started at that time. So I think it was 2 new genres of youth culture that sort of our generation created, and there was a whole new kind of scene that came along with it, and it meant there was places you could go to. So I was getting, what was I now? So I was 15. We were going into pubs and that, into town, a little bit more frequent now, and there was a definite sort of the goths and the psychobillies kind of mixed well together. You could always find each other at the clubs together, and it was kind of like a really good scene that I really enjoyed. It's back to, so the old flares were kicked out, back to the skinny jeans, the drain pipe jeans. I can't think for the life of me what I used to wear on my feet. I think it was just a pair of Docs. I mean, a pair of Dr. Martin, 8 old Dr. Martens, it would cover a multitude of different genres back in them days. So I'm pretty sure it was just them. I can't think, did my mate had some sort of winkle pickery type thing going on? And you could get them, some lads used to wear the crepe, the old crepey teddy boy shoes from the Beetle Crushers from back in the 50s. You could get them at the at Oasis. Oasis, man, what a shop that was. So if anyone who's kind of from the northern area listening to this, there's a place in Manchester called Flex, and it's good, and I'd imagine when back in the day it was amazing. But there was a place in Birmingham called Oasis, and it was very similar to a Flex. So it was all full of little independent traders. It was on about 4 or 5 floors, and it kind of went downstairs as well. And it was downstairs, there was a cafe, and all the skinheads and punks used to hang downstairs, and there was like a little record shop down there, and there was this Greasy Spoons cafe. It was full of, you could smoke obviously inside back in them days, so you'd go downstairs into the basement bit, and there'd be all these mean skinheads all over the shop and these punks, and it stunk of like grease, and proper Greasy Joe's cafe it was, and there'd be like this blue haze of smoke all over the place. It was like every booze you walked into actually in them days. And then upstairs on each different level they'd be interspersed with its own little genres of sort of youth culture. So there was like a little mod section, there was a scarish kind of section, there was a leather shop, we could get biker leathers and all that sort of stuff. Then there was sort of a punky sort of section, and these were people, I mean, they were just a little bit older than us, but these were obviously people they were designers and guys and kids that were kind of just doing their own thing. They were making stuff at home or in their own little workshops, bringing them into these little units inside this bigger sort of shop and selling them to the likes of us. And it was fantastic. It was the place to go if you were a sort of young alternative guy in Birmingham back then. Everybody knew about Oasis. It was the place to go on a Saturday. So you go to Reddington's Rare Records, then you go to Oasis, and I can't think. Then we'd, depending on what thing you were into, like I said earlier, we went up to up by the library, and there was this little milk bar we used to go to when I was in that mod sort of scene. But you'd always find places to go to. So anyway, there was this sort of, there was a lot of goth stuff coming on in back then. So there's loads of little goth shops in Oasis, and like I say, the psychobilly scene kind of married in well with it. And I think for me, it went back to that sort of, there was the style of dress and the music that kind of really hit home with me. So I used to wear maybe a leather jacket, and I used to bleach my jeans. We've talked about that in the past sort of episode, didn't we? So you bleach your jeans, you'd have sort of drain pipe jeans, pair of Docs on maybe, and usually just a t-shirt, and we used to cut the sleeves off your t-shirt, and it was just a t-shirt of a band, a band t-shirt, or just a black t-shirt, or just a white t-shirt cut off, and it was really simple. But I think the main thing with the psychobilly look was to get the most fantastic, outrageous flat top that you could. And some of the guys, I mean, there was some of the bands that we were into, so there was like Demented Are Go, still going now actually, and the Meteors, and they had the most outrageous flat tops you could possibly imagine. They were insane, like a foot high at the front, going right back at this sort of 30-degree angle, right back to the crown of the head. It was a fantastic haircut. But obviously with me, with that stupid wavy hair that I've got, which is alright now it's long, it looks alright, but then when you want dead straight hair, and you couldn't have it, so you just had to make the best of it. So my mate, he had this awesome perfectly dead straight hair, and he could get the most amazing flat top you could possibly imagine. And for some reason, we used to go to the other side of the city to get our hair cut, and it was this old boy. He'd obviously been cutting flat tops and that since the 1940s. Do you know what I mean? It was a proper old-fashioned barbers. You know, you'd walk in, there's loads of old men sitting there smoking. Place yet again another blue haze of smoke as you walked in through the door. There literally would be porno mags on the little side table. You know, just sort of sitting there, and Durex machines on the wall. You know, it was a proper men's kind of proper barbers from back in the day. Porno mag. Can you imagine that? You walk into a barber and there's a load of porn mags on the Maybe, Andy, if you're listening to this, you should maybe imagine a trick. That's it. Instead of having the local paper on, just have a few porno mags. It don't have to make a difference. So we went in. It was like you're that age, so you look at a porno mag and you daren't pick it up just because it's like, ooh, naked women. So, but anyway. This guy, he was just like, what a barber he was. He could get you. It was one of these times, you know, prior to that, you either used to have the classic bowl haircut that your parents used to give you, or it was a very generic, page boy sort of haircut. They used to say, didn't it, that sort of college preppy sort of haircut that all the square kids would have. So it was this guy. He would say that you go to the barber shop, and there wasn't. Well, you never used to go to the barbers really. You just used to go to your mum's hairdressers, like I say, if you ever went to a proper hairdresser's, or you got your mates to. I remember once we all. That's another story, but I remember once we all got them. There was these manual hair clippers that you could get. So obviously not the electric ones that you can get nowadays, but these were manual ones. I think they're probably similar to what they shear shape with now. And I don't know if someone got older and we all decided to shave our head, and it took your head just right down to the bone virtually. It was insane. I've never had such short hair. Anyway, so my mate, he could get this amazing flat top, and this guy took hours on it, and it was perfectly it was dead straight. If you looked at him front on, it went straight up, so his head looked as if he looked a bit like what was that, Max Headroom from the 80s. He was a sort of robotic character on MTV in the 80s, so he looks a bit like him. But and then it come to my haircut, and it's no matter what, he had this amazing pomade that he'd stick in your hair to stick it up. And when I left the shop, it looked fantastic. But you know what it's like, you go home, you wash your hair, you try and do it again, it just looks crap, and it just looked diabolical. And we'd go to this bar. I can't remember what the name of the bar was now, but it was down the part of town where UB40 had a club, and it was kind of next door but one to that, and it was where all the sort of rockabillys, and there was a few sort of rockabilly girls and a few goths and that would turn up, and they'd have a sort of decent jukebox, and you could get served in there because you'd all had that sort of look. Do you know what I mean? We must have all looked pretty young, but it was different back then. I think if you had that particular look and you fitted in, it wasn't a big deal. So anyway, but with my hair, I couldn't get it right, and then the only time we got it half decent was when we used sugar and water instead of hairspray. So back then, hairspray, I think the 80s has got a lot to answer for the ozone layer, because I think some of my mates alone contributed to the depletion of the ozone layer with the amount of hairspray they put on just going to school, never mind when they went out on a Saturday night. So but my hair could never do anything with it. So one night we decided to put sugar and water on it. It was like, I tell you what, if I'd fallen off my motorbike with sugar and water on my hair, I wouldn't have needed a helmet. It was like rock hard. You try it if you dare. I mean, it does wash out. Don't get me wrong, a bit of hot water, it soon washes out. But it's the best. That was the best my hair ever looked, with sugar and water, and it was pretty good. But then I decided to change it a bit. So basically, when Greg still had sort of like a normal flat top, I decided to go a little bit more extreme. So I got all of my head shaved at the back and at the sides, and then I had basically, if you were looking at the top, from the top of my head, so like a plan view of my head, it would be like a horseshoe of hair. So even the inside, so the top of my head was shaved, but this like a horseshoe of hair was left, and that was kind of sticking up in like a vague flat top. So it kind of was maybe about 2 to 3 inches at the front, you know, at the top of the where my forehead was, going back to kind of nothing on an angle at the crown of my head. So, and I kind of got, that was pretty cool actually, because no one else had that. But I only got it because I'd seen a band, I think it was the Meteors, one of the Meteors had that sort of haircut, or maybe King Kurt or somebody like that. But it was one of the bands that we'd seen, and I thought, oh, that looks good. So I decided to copy it, and got some funny old looks, because obviously my head was completely bald, you know, at where it was shaved. It wasn't just shaved, it was bald. So it took a bit of getting used to. And we had some sort of clippers that we used to keep it going. And you discovered that once you'd been to the barbers and you'd had that cut, once he'd done the hard work, you could kind of trim it yourselves to keep it in line to a degree. But you would have to go to the barbers at least once a month to get it looking wicked again. But yeah, I got into some of the awesome bands back then. One of the best gigs we ever went to was we went to see a band called Death Cult, and they were called Southern Death Cult, and then they changed the name to Death Cult, and then they became The Cult, and it was basically the same band, The Cult, that kind of most, dare I say, normal people will have heard of, but this was their early sort of era. And we went to see them at the Tin Can Club, which is down in Digbus, is it? Yeah, Digbus down in Brum. And God, what a gig that was. So we were 15ish, I think. It was the first gig I ever went to, proper gig, and it was awesome. The Tin Can Club was basically a strip joint, and they used to have kind of goth and rockabilly nights and psychobilly nights on. So they had the Cult. I think the following week they had the Meteors on, and then they had bands, I'm not sure if they had Bauhaus, but they had sort of all of that sort of alternative kind of music scene going on when they weren't stripping, basically. But it was a really good club. It was like a sort of I'm thinking Voodoo Lounge, but that's just an album of the Cramps that I'm thinking of. But what am I saying? It was kind of like a tropical kind of Hawaiian-y kind of look. So it had like loads of bamboo in there, and I mean, if my memory serves me well, this was a long time ago. You're talking 40 odd years ago now. This is so, but it was one of the seminal moments. So we were there. Me and Greg, loving it, and there was this dancing, right, that the psychobillies used to do. We used to call it chicken dancing, because basically you look like you're impersonating a chicken, so you're fucking flapping your arms and sort of bumping into one another. It was actually called Wrecking. It was called the Meteors did a song, I think they did a whole album called The Wrecking Crew, and it basically kind of like, so you're flapping your arms like a chicken, and then you're kind of pushing out at the same time, if you get what I mean. It's kind of like a bit of a precursor to moshing, and just another genre of dancing that our generation bestowed upon the world. So, but yeah, so we was like moshing away, and I think there was a punk band on before, and there was all sorts of like punks. No real skinheads there. It was just punks and sort of loads of goths, and sort of a few sort of psychobillies, rockabilly types. And what a gig it was. So Ian Asprey was just wandering around the venue. It was just because obviously the Cult weren't massive then. They were still sort of an underground sort of sort of alternative band. They hadn't got into that kind of rocky sort of scene that they kind of got known for in the late 80s. So it was like, it was great. There was these two 15-year-old kids, like, in awe of, like, well, all of these amazing sort of punks and goths and everything else that was surrounding us, but we felt like part of it because we were in our own little sort of subculture uniform. And there was the band. They were just sort of walking around chatting to one another, and then they got on stage and played the gig, and it was just like, whoa. So we'd been listening to this album it wasn't an album, it was like an EP or a mini album. It's called Death Cult. What was the album called? Let me just Google it for you. Yeah, it was just called Death Cult. I've just Googled it and flipping it. Someone's selling an album. It was an EP, and they're selling it for 41 quid. I think I've still got it upstairs in the loft. All my albums are in the loft. I haven't got a record player anymore. Ooh, maybe I should invest in one. I don't know if I'd listen to them though. You know, I think I maybe would, but I'll just stick them on Spotify. It's easier. But yeah, so it was awesome. It was, what a gig that was. I think it was a Friday night, maybe Friday or a Saturday night. Because remember, we caught the last bus home, so it was. They probably didn't even come on stage till about 10, so we'd have got out of there long gone midnight, and then it would have been, you walked back into town, because Dig was kind of just out of the city centre a little bit, so we'd have walked back up through the Boring up onto New Street to get the bus, and we'd have caught the last bus home, well, one of the night buses home. I think the night bus used to go all night long. They were great, the night buses. What a good laugh they used to be. Everyone was pissed up, and just there was never any trouble. It was just a real good crack on there, good laugh. So I remember we caught the night bus home. So I must have got home maybe about 2ish, say, something like that. And this is one of the reasons I remember this gig so well is because I got locked out. So I went home and I thought I'll try the door. I wasn't trusted with the key, so it was like, so if you're not home at a certain time, you get locked out. We ain't bothered if you're dead in a ditch somewhere, you got your head kicked in. We're not bothered, we're going to bed and locking him out. So it was like, I got locked out. So I managed to kind of somehow, the garage door didn't quite lock properly, so I managed to kind of break into the garage, and the garage wasn't attached to, well, it was attached to the house, but you couldn't get into the house through it. So I remember breaking into the garage and then just sleeping in the car for the night. And he was like, then I woke up in the morning, got up, and there was no like, where you been all night? It was just like, your breakfast there. It's just like, fucking hell. I mean, looking back, at the time it was just normal, you know, but it's like now, if my daughter hadn't come in, like, I would be thinking, where the fuck have you been? Where are you? Be like searching the streets for her, not locking her out and saying, you know, sleep in the car. So, but different generations, different parents, different everything with that then, wasn't it? So yeah, that was a awesome gig, the Death Cult. And I remember getting the tickets back then. So this is how long ago that was, because we went to the Virgin shop to get the tickets, and it wasn't a Virgin megastore even then. So Richard Branson wasn't even the multimillionaire he was to become. So this was, when was this? It must have been about 83, 84. And you know, so it was just a Virgin shop, and you'd go in and you could get all the tickets for everything there, and you just pay your money. I think it cost us about £4 just to see the band, and it was just like, what a night. Absolutely. We still go on about it now. It's just like, and I think they've just had a 40th anniversary tour, and I know Greg had gone to see it with a couple of other lads. I think they'd gone up to Glasgow to see it. I couldn't make it, but they said it was Boston, really good night. So, but yeah, then with the days back in the day, proper gigs, you get to see the band up close and personal. Gigs cost you next to nothing, you know. You're talking £4 to see a band of that calibre. And I don't know, we weren't into merch or anything at that point, so we probably was there, but we didn't get any. We were just buzzing after seeing the band, you know, two 15-year-old kids, kind of like out in the middle of town, strip joint, watching this sort of alternative punky goth band, and then going home. Cracking night. So I think on that little gem I shall call it a day. We've been going now for over an hour, so I think that's enough of me waffling on about my musical journey through life so far. I think the next one, I've got one more on music, I promise you, and then I'm going to change the format slightly. I've got some new video and audio equipment, so we're going to sort of mix it up a bit and combine the two. So that's something for you to look forward to, because not only will you be able to hear me, you'll be able to see my ugly mug too, so which is good. But no, honestly, I've got some good guests coming on soon, and I need to mix it up a bit and sort of start to learn a bit more about the editing and everything else, and make it a bit more interesting for people to listen to and to watch. So thank you ever so much for taking the time out and listening to me waffle on. It's been a pleasure as always. Like I said, if anything I've talked about has resonated with anybody, whether it be music, addictions, just wanting to chat, wanting to catch up, drop us a line and drop us a DM, and I will more than happily. I always reply to everybody's messages. I do get quite a lot of messages actually. It's really interesting some of the things that have kind of come about because starting this podcast, it's been probably one of the best things I've ever done. Really looking forward to taking it further, and I hope you stick with me and enjoy the ride that we're all going to go on in the future. So again, thank you so much for listening to me. Take care everybody, and for this week from the Caravan of Love, it's time for me to say goodbye. Love you all, take care all, see you, bye. Ladies and gentlemen, Teddy Tim has left the building.